Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and I thought I would do another voiceover of some training footage today in my sexy ASMR voice for all of you. A lot of people are like, when you do these, it's kind of like sex for our ears. So let me go ahead and do that. Alright guys, some of the training footage I've released in the last couple days, I've discussed the whole concept of training and engraving good technique over and over and over with moderately heavy weight. One of the big perks of doing triples, because you can do a lot of volume with moderately heavy weight with perfect technique, maximum bar speed, things like that. And that's how you get stronger. That's a fantastic technique of accumulating strength, because you build technique, you build power, you build speed, and invariably, because of the amount of volume you end up doing, you build significant amounts of hypertrophy. Also, you build muscle mass, because that's something that's been noted in the scientific literature pretty extensively. Volume, actual training load, seems to be a big driver of hypertrophy. Some people would argue, some experts even argue, that it may be the most important driver of hypertrophy, of muscle size. The amount of workload you're doing, total workload you're doing, how much work that muscle's doing seems to be probably the most important factor in how much size growth that you stimulate, right? Anyone disagreeing with that? I don't think so. So the question that comes up is, well, if you're training hard or you keep adding weight to the bar, won't your form eventually break down? I mean, isn't it unavoidable that form is going to break down? And my answer to that is no, not necessarily. Not necessarily. There are a lot of systems of training, and very proven systems of training, that avoid that completely. It can be done. It can be done. Now, does that mean that it always should be done? That's always the best? Maybe, maybe not. We could argue about that a lot, couldn't we? I'm not going to argue about that here. I'm going to discuss that, yeah, it can be done. And here's the thing. I'll jump into what I'm saying with what I'm doing, and I'll even discuss some Bulgarian training and stuff like that here. But look at my novice program. All right, look at the progression system that I put in place on my novice 5x5. At this point, we know at least 10,000 or more people have run this program. Tons of people have said, yeah, it's really successful. It's really successful. Now, I based it upon previous templates of 5x5 programs. My program is not really original. It's not original. I stood on the shoulders of giants when I wrote that program. I incorporated a couple different ideas from various coaches around the world who put out stuff over the decades when I put that program together. But one of the things that I incorporated was weight resets, meaning when you fail a lift, you're done. You're done. And if you fail that lift twice, you have to reduce the weight 10% and start over a bit. So in other words, you get to 150 pounds and you fail twice, 2 workouts in a row with that weight, you run into a failure problem. You've got to reduce the weight 10%, which means in that case 15 pounds comes off the bar. You go from 150 down to 135 and you build back up. In other words, we're forcing progression with good form, because I define failure the same way I normally define failure. A lot of people say, oh, well, failure means that you got pinned under the weight. No. Failure means that you had to cheat or grind to lock it, or your form breaks down. You had to use bad form, which required a certain degree of cheating in order to lock the last rep. Now, cheating can vary. It could be, did you bounce it off your chest on the bench press? Did your ass come off the bench? Did you shift to the side? Did you shift to the side on the bench press or the overhead press? That's one of the ways that people cheat the weight up. That's also how you get unilateral muscle imbalances, by the way. How about you hitched on your deadlift? You hitched on your deadlift because you couldn't lock it clean. How about if you shimmy up, like when you're squatting? You guys know what I'm talking about, where they have that jerky movement on the final 6 to 8 inches. They jerk and shimmy on the way up. It's like a jerking, almost a piston-like movement, right? That's form breakdown. That's a form breakdown. When that happens, we count that as a failure. You stop. That means you've pushed too far. Because in other words, when form breakdown is required for you to do one more rep on a lift, what's happened? The muscles in the primary movers are no longer capable of generating enough force to lift it. In other words, you fatigued the muscle fibers with that weight on that rep to their limits. You're no longer capable of benching the weight with your pecs, delts, and triceps anymore. You have to shift to the side. Same thing on the squat. You're having to jerk your way up and use some inertia. Same thing on the hitch. You can't lock it with your back anymore, so you have to hitch to get your hips back under the weight and use your thighs to help push it up a little bit, right? In other words, the muscles you're trying to use, the primary movers on the exercise, have stopped being able to lift it. They're shot. They're done. They have reached their maximum fatigue with the weight that you currently have on the bar or the dumbbell or the cable, right? They've reached their maximum fatigue, and you now have to involve a different movement pattern to cheat the way up, or involve new muscles, or use some sort of additional inertia or leverage to continue moving it. Form breakdown. Form breakdown is starting to occur. That's the point to where we have to back down, because when that form breakdown occurs, you're no longer recruiting the muscle fibers that you want. If you have to shift to the side, you're now using inertia to slide your body and get a leverage under the bench press. Your pecs and triceps aren't able to do it anymore. So you're not recruiting any additional fibers. They're done already. So in other words, when form breakdown occurs, you're no longer targeting the muscles you want, and you're ingraining motor patterns that you don't want. So I would argue that my program is set there to where when we see that occur, you know that you've pushed to the limit. Now, that's only for novice lifters. More experienced lifters don't have to do that. We already know our limits. We know when we have one rep left and we're about to have to grind or cheat. We know that. The novice isn't. So at a certain point, we allow for one rep where form starts to degrade a little bit. And then we say, okay, that's too far. It's time to reel it in. So in their case, is it necessary sometimes, depending upon a really, really aggressive progression pattern for a noob? Sometimes it is necessary. For a more experienced lifter, it isn't. Take, for example, what I just described. I get under there and I do, for the accumulation work, all the bench press stuff, as many sets of 3 as I can handle and maintain good bar speed. If I feel like I can't do another set with maximum speed, I don't attempt that next set. Because for me, maintaining perfect form and perfect bar speed is a requirement. I'm only interested in doing more reps over time in a volume that my body can generate maximum force with perfect technique on. So yeah, it's all going to be perfect. What about Bulgarian training? Bulgarian training, people hit training maxes every day. You come in and you squat 6 days a week. I've got my squat over 500 pounds doing that. Hell, Mike Rashid got his squat over 500 pounds doing that. You guys remember that? So 2 different YouTubers you guys have seen do that. Well, there's people out there who have 700 pound squats and stuff who use this system. You come in and you lift, you ramp the weight up and you lift the heaviest weight that you can lift with maximum bar speed and good form. You know that you reached your max when it's slightly slower. In other words, when you do your training max on that, if the bar starts to slow down at 450, but you still maintained good form, but you don't hit good speed, you don't try 460. Why? Because you know the form will break down when you add another 10 to 20 pounds, because the bar starts to slow a little bit. Advanced lifters know this stuff. So you always stop on that training system before form breaks down. And someone who's been training for a year and knows their body and knows their bar speed and is able to feel these things can completely avoid bad form while lifting bone-crushing poundages day after day after day after day. Now, this is talking about maximum strength, maximum power, but the same thing applies to hypertrophy. Shouldn't you be training within a system that allows you to maximize fatigue, maximize workload, maximize volume with good technique so that, number 1, you don't get injured, number 2, every set that you do actually is stimulating growth where you want it, instead of just building fatigue and fatiguing your nervous system, which impedes recovery. It impedes recovery without additional growth stimulation, because when you start cheating the weight up, what's happening? You're still creating peripheral nervous system fatigue. You're still creating stress on the body that you have to recover from, but you're no longer recruiting the muscle fibers that you need. They're done. They've reached their maximum threshold. They're not going to be stimulated much further. You've pretty much reached it. They're going to get as big as they're going to get from that session. You need to move to another exercise at that point, or in the training session. And that's ultimately what it comes down to. So I would say no, it isn't necessary to ever use bad form. It's just not a requirement. Alright guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.